Yo, what is up YouTube? Back at it again with another video. Today we're going to talk about zero gapping. So you clicked on this video because you want to know what the best, fastest, and easiest way to zero gap your trimmers and clippers is. Well, I got news for you. I don't know. The truth is no one really does. No one except yourself. What I can show you is all the different techniques that is out there so that you can try them out, and only then will you know which one works best for you. So don't tell them I told you, but all those barbers and all these videos telling you they got the best way, they're lying. They figured out the way that works best for themselves, but it's now time for you to figure out yours. Now, before we do that, let's talk some pros and cons. So the pros, specifically within the trimmer, is you're going to be able to get sharper lines when doing edge ups. You're going to be able to get closer to the skin, which will also, at times, allow you to eliminate the need of a razor and or a shaver. It's also going to help you erase the line from the shaver to the clipper a lot easier. Now, when looking at the clippers, just a couple benefits, but definitely should be mentioned. A better and or easier transition from your trimmer and or your shaver, and you'll also be able to cut more precisely. Now, as far as negatives go, you may irritate the skin and or even cut somebody if you're too heavy-handed or you're over zero gapped. You can also potentially pull the hair or dig into the skin. So remember, when zero gapping, never allow the moving blade to go past the still blade. Now, when talking about all these techniques, let's take a look at what tools you may need. First off, we're going to start off with the Cool Care or any type of clipper cleaner that you have. You're also going to need some oil to oil your blades after you clean them. And obviously, we're going to take advantage that we're taking the blades off of our machines and clean them up with this brush. As far as screwdrivers go, you're going to need 2 Phillips screwdrivers, one larger head and then a much smaller one. I'm going to use the one that comes in the Wahl Zero Gap little tool that they give you, just because I find it's the perfect size for those small little screws. And because we're going to be going over how to adjust the gold FXs, we'll be using the tool that comes in their kit. And last but not least, shout out to Ron Legend. We're going to be using his technique, one of his hacks, which is a business card. Oh, and quick disclaimer, do not use power tools. And we're going to go ahead and get started with the clippers. We're going to start by removing the screws that go on the steel blade. Usually I would not take these completely off just to gap my machine, but because we're going to go ahead and take advantage and give it a quick clean, I'm going to go ahead and remove them completely. Take away both of the actual blades, hit them with some Cool Care after I brush them down, and then make sure I oil them again so that they're running nice and smooth. Go ahead and check it out. And I'm sure some of y'all are going to be wondering why I decided to oil my blades this way. But to be honest with you, I like my blades to be oiled. It prevents them from rusting, keeps them running smooth. I clean them often so they don't gunk up, and it's just the best practice. And now we're just going to put our clipper back together, making sure that the blades are where they're supposed to be. Not paying too much attention right now about them being straight or zero gapped, because we're going to be going through all the different techniques. And before we get started, I want to make sure that you are in the closed position, as you can see, so that we can better gap our clippers. And we're going to go ahead and get started with the first technique, which is just using your eyes. You're going to find that sweet spot where the cutting blade gets really close to the steel blade, but does not overlap. When you find it, you go ahead and tighten up those screws, make sure it's straight, and you got yourself a zero gap. And after using each and every one of these techniques, we're going to make sure that our blade is centered. Using our thumbs, we're going to feel off to the sides, make sure that the blade is not hitting one of the sides more than the other. And moving on to our second technique, we're going to loosen up the back screws, tighten them up just a little bit, put our clipper blades towards a flat and hard surface, angle our clipper in a way where the moving or cutting blade could never overlap the actual steel blade, tighten our screws up before we're in a good spot, and check to see where we're at. And just like that, we got a zero gap. And now for our final technique on the clippers. Once again, we're going to loosen up those back screws. As you can see, the blade is very loose. And we're gonna go ahead and eyeball it again. Find that sweet spot that we want. Go ahead and tighten up one of the sides only, and then go back to see where we're at, because sometimes when you tighten up one of these screws, the blade will shift a little bit. As you can see, that right side is still pretty loose. And then I'm going to go ahead and find that sweet spot again on both sides, knowing that my left side has already been tightened up. Tighten up that right side, and I should have a zero gap once again. And now to talk about trimmers. We're gonna go ahead and use this Wahl Whiz, aka my cordless hero. If you haven't checked that video out, please make sure you do so. It's an oldie but a goodie. So we're gonna go ahead and take off that blade by removing the two top screws from the steel blade. And as you can see, the cutting blade and the steel blade do detach as well. And again, take advantage and clean them up. And for the adjustments on this blade, we're going to go ahead and use that small Phillips screwdriver that comes in the Wahl zero gapping tool. Go ahead and start by removing the cam follower just so you can have a little more space to work with. You can attach that blade back to your steel blade. Now you're not going to fully remove these screws, you're just going to loosen them up a little bit and then tighten them back up without fully tightening them up. This allows some movement within the blades for you to start making those adjustments that you want. And for our first technique with the trimmers, once again, we're just eyeing this one. We're going to use our eyes to find that sweet spot where the moving blade, the cutting blade, gets really close to the steel blade but does not overlap. And then when we find that spot, we're going to hold down our blades together and tighten up those screws. Now, when tightening these screws down, do not over tighten. You do not want to strip your screws. And just like that, once again, we got ourselves a zero gap. And once again, just like we did on our clippers, we're going to use the flat surface technique, putting our blades down into a flat surface and angling them in a way where the cutting blade cannot overlap the steel blade. We're going to center them, tighten the screws back up, and see if we got ourselves a zero gap. Now for trimmers specifically, there are some tools out there. Some are made directly from the company, like the one we're going to use right now, which is by Wahl, where you can just go ahead and insert your blade, make sure it's all the way pushed down and the cutting blade is pushed all the way forward, and then just tighten up your screws. I'm going to go ahead and make sure again, all the way pushed down and all the way pushed forward, and tighten up those screws. And you basically got yourself a zero gap. They work pretty nicely, pretty consistently. They're not perfect, but they do help. And again, other companies may not make them directly, but there's some third-party companies out there making them for other blades. Make sure you check it out for your specific blade. And now, just like we did once again with the clippers, we're going to use the one side at a time technique. We're going to loosen up our screws. find the perfect spot, tighten one side up, and then make sure that the other side is straight with the side we just tightened up. And when we feel that it's a nice zero gap and they're straight, we can go ahead and tighten that other side up, and we got ourselves a zero gap. And last technique we're going to use on this specific trimmer blade, shout out to Wahl Legend. I actually stole this one from him. It's actually a hack using a business card. All you do is you fold it in half. You use that edge that it creates when you fold it nice and neatly. Use it as a tool. You put your trimmer blade right in the middle of that. You tighten up your screws once both blades are just kind of touching that edge in the bottom, and you got yourself a zero gap. So now that we have successfully zero gapped our blades, we're going to go ahead and put them back on our trimmer. First, attach that cam follower back. Make sure that you're aligning those two little brackets that stick out, as well as the rotary motor in the middle. Once you find a good spot, just put your screws in, tighten them up, and you're ready to go. And notice how I'm still using that very small Phillips screwdriver to just kind of start the process of screwing in those screws on the back of the blade. But when it comes down to tighten them up, I'm going to go back to that bigger Phillips screwdriver just to make sure I don't strip anything. Now, when it comes to trimmers, there are a lot of different types of blades out there. So I wanted to make sure that I called out a couple other ones that are pretty popular. First, starting off here with the Andis. Doing the same thing, we're going to go ahead and remove both the screws from the back, take off the whole blade assembly, and as you can see, this also has those two small screws that you would loosen up, find a sweet spot for your zero gap, and then tighten back up, and that's pretty much it. You can run through any of those different techniques that we went over with the Wahl blade to zero gap your Andis T Outliner or GTX blades, and you get yourself a pretty sweet zero gap. And last but not least, the Skeleton FXs. Now these are special. They actually come with their own zero gapping tool, with their own screwdriver, which is just a miniature Allen wrench. The cool thing about these is that you actually don't have to remove the blade. The tool itself doesn't even have to be used, but if you want to use it, you're going to go ahead and attach it to the back of the blade like so. And again, you would loosen up those screws at the bottom this time. Find the sweet spot, make sure that it's nice and gapped the way you want it. You can tap with that tool at the bottom, make sure it doesn't overlap your still blade. Tighten up those screws again. As you can see, mine is pretty zero gapped. I like this spot right here for this specific trimmer. And once you tighten those up, you're good to go. You got yourself a zero gap with the Skeleton FXs. And that is it for today's video. I appreciate y'all watching. I hope that you found a technique that works best for you. Make sure to stay tuned in. Make sure you hit that subscribe button. And I'll see y'all on the next one.